Hi. So this tutorial is going to cover an Angular 2 project. So we're going to build an Angular 2 project using the Angular CLI, which is command line interface, which makes it quite easy to you know create new projects, create new components, create new services, and all the rest, and integrate them into your project. Um, So what we're going to achieve really is we're going to create a new project. I'm going to take you through the structure of an Angular 2 project, just explain what components are, the sort of makeup of each component, and how that's integrated into your project. Next, we're going to add a service to the project so that can make an API call to a public API that it's just an existing public API that returns some data. It's in JSON format data, but I'll show you that as well, what the result of that is going to be. So first, so just from the command line here, you can see here that we're located just inside my workspaces folder. So first of all, this assumes that you have Typescript installed in your computer and that you have Angular CLI. So just that's just a prerequisite to where I'm starting from here. So basically, whenever you're inside your workspaces folder, you just type in ng new and then say posts demo. So it's basically we're retrieving data that's to do with like posts, say blog posts or something like that, or news posts. So you just ng new and then post demo 2. I'm calling it 2 because I already have one called post demo. So if you just create that, you see here it has started to create the project, and it installs all of its dependencies and all the packages that it needs. You can see here that it's installing them via npm, which is which stands for Node Package Manager or Node Package Management or something. So yeah, that's just a way of getting all your packages. That's where all the external packages can be downloaded from and integrated with your project. So while this is going, I can just show you desktop workspaces. So here it has created this folder. It hasn't finished creating it yet, so we'll just wait. It shouldn't be too long. It doesn't take too long to install them, but so maybe I could just show you the type of data that we're going to be retrieving. So this project here is the actual project that has been created before. So I'm going to be referring to this project throughout the demo, just maybe to copy some code over so that it doesn't take too long with me, sort of live coding. So we'll just I'll just show you the type of data that we're going to be trying to retrieve. So this is the endpoint that we're going to be firing from the service. Yeah, so this is the data. So the ideal or the ultimate goal really is to send an API request and get this data returned so that we can display it in a table in the view. So this data will be called from the service. It'll be passed to the controller, which will in turn be passed to the view so that you can see it in your browser. So that's the ultimate goal, but I'm going to be going through it step by step so that it can be understood quite well what's happening. So this is taking a small bit longer than it should. Yeah, so maybe I'll just cut out this part of the video and we can resume whenever it is installed. Okay, so it's finished installing now. It took a bit longer than usual. I think it's because my Wi-Fi connection just where I am isn't great. So you can see here that it has installed the tooling and project post demo 2 successfully created. So we can now go to the project. Open the project. This is Visual Studio Code that I'm using. You could use anything like Sublime or anything like that. So this is the project structure. I'm not going to go through everything here. Like your package JSON, I'll show you this. This is just where you get your npm packages. This allows for anyone. This allows for tracking your packages. It's just like a. I mean, I think any framework or any language has a similar thing. Like I think your web config in C#. I think that's similar to it. But anyway, we'll just go into the source folder here. So in any Angular 2 project, the entry point for your front-end application is this main.ts file. So this is what will be loaded first when you serve up your application through the server. So you can see here it's similar enough to any other like C# or Java or anything that you import. You import different packages or different what's called modules, which I'll go through in a minute, or any components. So this last line here says app module. So Angular 2 projects are made up primarily of modules, which a module is a way of like combining and bootstrapping all the components and services and everything you need that's going to be distributed throughout your project so that you can use different components in any part of your project or use any shared services or anything like that between anywhere in your project. So this isn't too important. You never really have to change this unless you're using multiple modules, and I don't think that would really be the case with us. So app module is the main module that you're going to be using. So if you go in here, app.module, so this is what a module looks like, and you can see here that it's using other modules. It can pull in other modules as well. Like this is these are like components or packages from the Angular framework itself that it uses. So HTTP module, that's obviously the HTTP protocol for making API calls. So you need that. Forms module. Yeah, so I mean browser module. I'm not going to go through all of what these modules actually are, but just bear in mind that anything that you need to bring in will be as an import into your app.module file. So this import here is app component. So this is the first reference to any components within your project. So this means that you can see over here this app.component. Each component will comprise of 4 files. A TS file, which is Typescript, which is it's what Angular 2 uses instead of JavaScript. Ultimately, Typescript files are compiled to JavaScript anyway. There's quite a lot of similarities between the two. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, Typescript will come sort of quite easy. And on top of that, if you're familiar with C#, which I know a lot of you are, if you're familiar with C# or Java, well then that pulls in all that pulls in different things from that as well, different principles from that. But we can I'll show you throughout the demo. So basically, when you import a component, sorry, I'll just go through this component first. So this first component, it's the Typescript file. So this would be like your controller. So all your sort of business logic, you know, any sort of data transformation. So you know, I mean, everyone's familiar with what a controller does. So this spec file, this is just for your unit testing for your component, and we're not going to cover unit tests in this tutorial. HTML, so this is your view for your controller, so, or sorry, for your component. So this is the final destination for all your data to be displayed. So this is basically what's being served up to the user, which is obviously, yeah, I mean, we're all familiar with that as well. So you have your CSS file here as well. So all the anything that you put in this HTML file or CSS will be in relation to, will be linked to your TypeScript file, and that's linked via this template URL, and that's the path to this HTML file, and style URLs, this is the path to this here. So you can probably notice already that you don't have to reference the HTML and CSS within the component. You know, you can add, you can see here that this is actually an array, so you can actually you can reference more than one CSS. If you've shared CSS between different components, it's pretty handy for that. So you would just add in another path for a shared CSS file, which is really handy as well. So this is what sort of pulls in the HTML and CSS. This selector, app.root or app-root, this is what's used whenever you're placing your component in a different HTML file, or if you ever want to use this component anywhere, you will reference it as app-root, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Or how it's done already, because it has placed this in the HTML, in the index HTML file already. So this export class app component, this title equals app works is basically just a variable that you're going to be passing to your HTML file. So something that's an Angular 2, the way to reference a variable from that's located within your component is to put double curly brackets around it. So see this title, that corresponds to this. So if you have double curly brackets around anything in your HTML file, it'll reference a variable that's in your TypeScript file. So we'll just close this. There's no CSS for that at the minute, the way it builds it. So having said that, maybe we could just launch the app and just show you that it works right out of the box once you build your application using the ng-new up here. We'll just cd into it, and all you do is ng-serve. So this, whenever you build a new project, it creates like a server as well for you to serve up your application. So you can see here that it's just building it at the minute. Okay, so and then you see this is the location that you can view your application. So if we just put that in, you can see here app works. So Yeah, so and that's the string being passed to this HTML. So the way that you get this to the way that you use this component in the application is, so the first HTML file that is served up from the application is the index.html. You might have seen there whenever I loaded the app that it said loading. So this is what's displayed. Anything in here is what's displayed before the component is loaded. You can see app-root is this. So it seems quite straightforward that if you want to include a component in your application, it's quite straightforward that you just reference it like this. So once this index file is loaded, it looks at this, and then it looks in the components to see if there is a component with that same name, and if there is, it'll serve up the HTML file that this relates to, which is there. So so that's sort of how, that's a sort of route into the application and the sort of flow of control from the entry point to what you see on the screen. So normally this this main component, so this would be your main component, so this would be, all your other components would be displayed from inside here, and we're just going to create a new component now and show you how to link it up and to create new component and just get it displayed on the screen. So so the way to do that from Angular CLI is ng generate component, and then you just call it. So we'll just call it posts comp. No, we'll just call it posts, and then you hit enter. Okay, you have to be inside. Yeah, it wasn't inside the project, so it couldn't create it. Yeah, so that's it created now. What this does for you as well is it creates, so you see here post component, it has created an import in the module so that you can use this component anywhere in your application. So it's created it there and it's added it to the declarations. It's just something that needs to be put into declarations if you're using a component. You can see app component here is in there already as well. So let's see. So yeah, you can see over here now within the app folder you see posts. So this is your new component that we've just added. It's built in the same way, so you can see here that it has already referenced the HTML file and the CSS file, and the name of this one is now called app-posts. So you see that this component now has a constructor. So the main component here, app.component, doesn't have a constructor. I'm not exactly sure why, but every component you create will have a constructor and an ng on init, which is similar, but yeah. So now what we're going to do is use this in our main app component. So if you go to app.component, we're going to remove this and we're going to reference this. And go back to, yeah, posts works. So as well, like yeah, so with this as well, like any changes you make will refresh the browser and it'll just show you automatically. It's great. Like, you don't have to refresh the page automatically, or you don't have to install any like live reload plugins or anything like that. So you see here post works, and the reason you're seeing that is because let's see, yeah, so this is the HTML file for the posts component, and it just says posts works. So that's all fine. That's how you create a new component, and it's how you allow that component to be displayed on the screen. So what we're going to do next is I'm just going to reference this other yeah. So what we're going to do is create a variable like an array in the posts component, and then display that as a table on the view in the HTML file. So to do that, we need to create a variable so that we can hold the data. So that's it initially initialized. So the way that let's see. So the way Typescript works is that to create a new variable, you just name the variable, and then this is the type. You can put any in for the type if you're not sure what the data is. In this case, we know it's JSON, but we'll change that later. And then you just initialize an empty array. So in here, you can just let posts array equal some form of data. So for now, we're just going to hard code in the data, but that's obviously not the way it would be. But we're just taking it step by step. So you'll see me moving the data from this to the new service that we're going to create, and then you'll see us getting rid of the data altogether and making an API call. So just bear with us. I'll just copy this in from the other project. Uncomment that. So anyway, so the way that you reference, if you're manipulating a variable or changing its value or whatever, the way to reference that is to put this dot in front of it. That means that it's going to reference the variable of this name within this component, and then you just do equal. So this is just some dummy data here, title 1. So now that this is a variable that has some data within our component, we can now display this data in our view within a table or within anything. So I'm just going to copy over this table that I had already written. So this is just a table. You can see here it's quite simple. So in here, this is just like ng4. ng4 is just a way of repeating data. So this will repeat the tr. So this will do this for every row of a table. Posts array is our variable in our component, and then the way to reference, so if you do let post of posts array, so that will take in this array, and every element within that array will be referenced by post, so that whenever this is repeated, this will be repeated for every element that's in the posts array. So this will be, say, repeated 3 times because we have 3 elements in here. And then the way to reference the title and body is just posts, because this is each post, and then post.title and post.body. So you can see here that's the name of that element, and body is the name of the second element. So we'll just show you it being displayed on the table, on the view. So there you see title 1, body 1, title 2, body 2, and so on. So that's, I believe the same type of thing exists in C# as well. So you'll be familiar with how ng4 works. I'm not sure what the name of it is in C#. In Angular 1, it's ng repeat. So this is just basically the new ng repeat if you're familiar with Angular 1. So that's all quite, that's all alright. I mean, obviously it's not styled or anything, but we can add some style in here. So say posts table. Let's see. So we just give it a width, 80%. Let's see. Auto and right. So you see there, just makes it a bit more tidy. So far we've created a new project. We've created a new component. We have injected that component into the application, and we've created a new variable which is hard-coded data, and then we've displayed that data on the screen using a table and using ng4. So the next thing to do is to create a service that will deal with the data itself. So ultimately this service will make an API call, but for now we're just going to create the service and move this data into it, and then pass the data to this component, and then still keep this and display it in the view. So we can just go back to our command line, and so if we just do service, so we'll create a new services folder as well. Services. Right, so it's going to create a new folder called services, and then another folder called posts service, and then posts. That's going to be the name of the service itself. So if we just hit enter, so it's been created. You can see here that there's a warning where it says the service is generated but not provided. It must be provided to be used. So that's a reference to the app module again. So basically, when a component is created, it imports it automatically for you. But when a service is created, it doesn't automatically import it for you. I think it's for security reasons, so that you don't accidentally make your service available throughout the application, because sometimes you won't want it to be. You might have multiple modules or something, and you don't want it to be available. So if we just do it manually here, I think there's actually an addition to this command here that actually will import it for you, but I can't remember what it is. So if we go here, you see services, then post service. So you see the two files here. You have the service TS file and the spec file, which is for testing your service, which we're also not going to go into. So yeah, so within your module, to import this, you can see here anything that has to be imported has to have an export keyword here. So you can't import anything into your module if it doesn't have an export keyword here. So export class post service. So this is what you're looking to import. Yeah, so it was, so you just have to find, so you just have to find the correct path. So it should be services and then posts. Hopefully that, no, that's not right. Let's see, I think you have to go up one level. Let's see. Oh God, I have to find posts.service, because that's the name of this file here. You can leave out the .ts when you're importing. So we'll just go back here. I think it might be a dot. Yeah. Okay, so that's been imported. Okay. You have to provide that now to your application. So if you just go to here, providers, and paste that in. So now the service is available throughout your whole application. We can just go through the posts or the service syntax here as well. This injectable decorator just means that this class will be able to be injected into any component that needs it. It's basically just like it just allows the service to be used throughout any components. So basically, we just create a similar thing to what we did in the component, where you just create a new variable. And I just need to refer to yeah, so you just create a new variable, and the same as posts, so this is, you can see here that this is basically the same as what we had in our component. And in our component now, we're just going to we'll just comment that out for the time being. So we're going to create a new method within the service that's going to return this variable to wherever asks for it, basically. So if we just we create a new method called getPosts, simple, and it's just going to return this variable that we assigned this data to in the constructor. So basically, this service now can be used anywhere. This service can now be used anywhere in your application, and whenever getPosts method is called, it's going to return this data. So if we go to our posts now, we can, within the constructor, so first of all, to use this post service in our component, we need to import it again. We need to import it into this, so we'll just, you can just copy this line over. and it's in a different location now, so yeah, or not a different location but a different path from this component. So the next thing you have to do is whenever you import something, you need to set a variable name in the constructor. So you need to pass your service to the constructor so that the constructor can use it. So if you just give it a variable name and then the type. So this post service is coming from here, and then this is just the variable name. So this is basically instantiating an instance of this post service from within the constructor. So now you can just do okay, I don't think, let's see. Okay, so if you're passing something into the constructor, you don't need to use this keyword. So you can see here when we've typed out post service dot, you can see get posts, which was the method that we created from inside the service. So now what this is going to do, this is returning this set of data because it's calling this get posts and it's returning this. So if we want to display this data in our view, we now just do this dot posts array equals. So then this variable, you still have to instantiate this variable, and then you let whatever comes back from the service equal this dot posts array. So hopefully it will still, yeah. So you can see there that it has taken in the data from the service. It has taken in this data from the service that has been passed through this get posts method to here, and we're letting that equal this dot posts array. So I mean that's all well and good, but this would still not be done in the real world. You would never hard code in this type of data. You would never hard code in the data into a service. That's sort of pointless. So what we're going to do next is we're going to make an API call to that endpoint that I showed you earlier. So this endpoint, and we're going to retrieve all this data and display it in that table, in this table. So from within, so we'll start with this post service. So we need to create an endpoint. We need to bring in the endpoint. So now we're just creating a variable called endpoint URL, and it's of type string, and we'll just copy this from here. I mean, something that we're not really going to cover now anyway is that, I mean, this endpoint would never be hard coded into the service either. It would always be passed to the service. You know, endpoints are always built by whatever the user is actually selecting on the screen. But it's not really within scope for this tutorial. We're just going to put this endpoint in here so that we can just use it as necessary. So that's the endpoint taken into the service. That's the endpoint created in the service. So the next thing that we need to say about is an observable. So an observable is basically, it's a way of transmitting data, and it's a way of watching a stream of data. Let's see, I'll copy this in from here. Copy these, and then I'll explain them. So this observable, so you have to import observable, and that's from a package called rxjs. Basically, an observable is an object that carries a data stream. So this observable can be used in your service to watch data from within a database. If it changes, well then it's notified, then the observable is notified. Any of the data in the database changes, well then your application is aware of that, and that's made possible through observable. So then just these other imports is so that's important rxjs itself, and then this is important an observable object from that package. This is important a map object, which is used to extract the data from the observable. So it's basically used to sort of extract and format and make sense of the data that's being returned. And then this HTTP, that's just the HTTP protocol for making the API call itself. So that, you know, that would be like your HTTP post, HTTP get, and, you know. So what we do next, we'll just yeah. So this get posts. The way to use observable is to make this post of type observable. So that means that anything that's being returned by this here is going to be an observable object, and this any is the type of it's kind of like if you were creating it describes the structure of the data that's going to be returned, and the type of data. So say if you had an interface, we're not going to cover that here, but if you had an interface, you know, kind of like a model in C#, it just describes the types of data that's going to be returned. You would put that in there. So if you had an interface object, you would put that in there so that this method knows what type of data and the structure of the data that's being returned. So anyway, I'll just copy it from here as well. So there's a few things we need to do first, and so just like the service that we had to import, just like here where we had to inject the dependency into the constructor, you need to do the same with HTTP. So this is just the variable. So is that not? Oh, okay, so we have to make it private. Yeah. And we'll just copy this down because this is a different name than I had in the other project. So this is going to return this .http.get and then this .endpoint. So that passes this endpoint into this http.get method, so that it's going to go to this endpoint and retrieve the data. And then this .map is a way of like transforming the data that you get back into a certain format, or extracting the data from the observable object. So map response, this is just what's coming back. You can call this anything. So, you know, RES. It's not relating to anything else in your service. It's just yeah. So and then that's transforming it into JSON format, which it is already, but it needs to be parsed as it comes in. So now we can get rid of this. We'll just comment it out, and we can get rid of this. So basically, no, I'll just remove it because it's slightly confusing if it's sitting commented. So what we're doing is we're just passing the endpoint, and we're making a HTTP GET to that endpoint, and we're parsing the data as JSON format. So now the way to retrieve data from this observable is basically that you have to subscribe to it. So this service is ready to go anywhere within your project, but if a method is returning an observable, well then any component that you're going to use that service in, or that method, needs to what's called subscribe to that observable. So we'll just go over here again and copy it in. Yeah, so this is the correct syntax. So we'll just comment, now we'll just remove all this. So it's similar to, no, I'll remove this. Yeah, so it's similar to this, line, only you're not letting it equal. You're not doing this dot posts equals post service dot get posts. The way that it's done is that you just call the method, and then you subscribe to the method, and then you transform the data and let it equal this using this arrow function. Might be slightly different syntax than you would be used to, but you know, you get used to the way it's done. So then you do, so this posts in is what comes back from this get posts method, and then you're letting that equal this dot posts array. So now hopefully, let me save that, hopefully we'll get all the data. No, we didn't. So there's something yeah, so that looks okay. I'm not sure why. I'm just going to cut the video there, and I'm just going to cut it here and come back whenever I've figured out what the problem is here. Okay, so it turned out that the reason was because my Wi-Fi had disconnected. So, you know, it couldn't make the API call because it's on the internet. So this is all the data that's being returned from the API. You can see here that this is basically the same as all this data here. So there was one more thing, but that's basically how you create. That's how you create an Angular 2 or Angular 4. I mean, the difference in Angular 2 and 4 is isn't that much. Basically, Angular 4 is made to be backward compatible with Angular 1. It's, you know, it has things like it has things to upgrade Angular 1 components to Angular 2 components, say. So there isn't much difference. So Angular 2, when I say Angular 2, I mean Angular 2 or Angular 4. I should have mentioned that at the start, but so basically that's like a working application that, you know, we've created a new component, we've created a service, and we've made an API call and retrieved data and displayed it in the view. So the last thing now is, so the power that comes with components is that you can reuse them anywhere in your application. At the minute, this posts component, it's not very configurable or reusable. You know, it does one thing basically. The power behind components is that you can pass data to it to describe its functionality. So you can basically parameterize your components, and quite a simple way of doing that is just by passing data from the parent component to the child component. So a parent and child components are, so this main component, this is a parent component, and this posts component is the child component of this main component, and the reason for that is that the posts component is referenced from inside the main component. So you could have a child component of this app posts component quite easily. You could just you know, if you had a component called child comp, well then you could reference it inside this, and then the family tree then would be this main component, then this posts component, and then this child component. And that structure is quite important for passing data, because data is only supposed to be passed from parent to child or child to parent. This is a security measure that's implemented in Angular 2. It's quite easy to do that. It's quite easy to pass data, so the only thing now is to go to post component, it's the Typescript file. So we're creating a variable so that we can take data from the parent component, and that is done by, let me just have a look, it's the input. So yeah, we'll just copy this over. So you use the input decorator. So this, and you have to import it also. And that's located in Angular core, so you just import it and you can use it. So this basically means that whenever you specify this input decorator, that means that this next variable, yeah, I'm not sure if it's only applied then to this next variable, or it's applied to the whole component. but basically that means that you can take in data, and if it's referenced as input whenever you're inputting the data, well then it'll be assigned to this. So we're going to input a variable name called number. So the way that this is done is from the parent component, wherever this app posts is being called from. So let's see, we'll just set this up. So we'll just comment this out. We're not dealing with this data anymore. So we'll just set this up as equals 5, so you can just see it being displayed. So you can see there 5 is displayed because this variable is now 5, and we're displaying input var in the curly brackets. So that's just the same as we've been doing. But if you go to the place where this is being, this component is being called from, you can, within here, so I'll just misspell that. So this input var is so this input var is now whatever you let it equal here. It's going to assign that to this, and it's going to override this as well. So you can have like a default variable name for that, or you can have a default value for that variable, and then this will override it. So hopefully it'll display the number 10 here. Loading. No, that's not right. I'll just get it from here. Oh yeah, I think it's double. I think it's double quotes. Yeah, so you can see there that we have basically passed in a variable from here, and it's been taken in to the component. So we could basically use this multiple times with different variables. So 15, say 145. Yeah. So there you can see that it has used this component multiple times, but with different variables. So this is really good for introducing configuration to your components. So you know, this doesn't have to be a number or a string or anything. It could be like a JSON file that has configuration in it. So say for example, you could have a component for a navigation area, and then you want to configure it based on what type of what the link names and the URLs that the link names go to. You could pass in a JSON object into here, and you could have, within the JSON object that you're passing in, you could have like the link names and the link URLs, and then within your component you could build that component based on those configurations. So I mean that's kind of outside the scope of this. It's a bit more in depth than perhaps we need to go at the minute. But this kind of shows you the power really of Angular. I mean, you know, React has the same sort of outcome, and the way that you do it is quite similar as well than React. But this is this is just an Angular 2 tutorial. I think that sort of covers it for today. Yeah, I'm hoping that you can see the value in this type of architecture for front end, and I hope you are as excited about it as I am. So yeah, we'll just leave it there. I will upload the code as well for this project somewhere. I'm not sure where yet, but you can just come and speak to me. You can just come and speak to me if I haven't let you know where the code actually is for this. It might just help you to understand it. You can download the code and run it yourself, and you can play about with it. Yeah, so that's about it. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later.